Hey, Matt Scratch here, and today I'm working on my mom's 2006 PT Cruiser. I'm doing a custom paint job on it for her. I'm going to be doing it red on the bottom and black on the top, a nice two-tone. And I've been actually working on this project off and on for a couple years now, but I'm planning on getting it finished up in the next little bit here. It is in final primer. And so I'm going to start doing some videos on paint prep, final paint prep and stuff like that, block sanding. And so we're just going to get started on that here today and show you the process. So this PT, we're actually putting a PTeaser front end kit on it as well. So you can see the crash bar there, that's part of the PTeaser kit. I've got the car fully primed, and I've taken a lot of care in this car in terms of things like around the door handles and stuff. I've smoothed out all those stamping marks, those common little ripples you get around door handles and around the edge of roofs, around the pillars and stuff. All that's been taken care of, so this car is going to look like glass when it's done. So the car's been all finished in DuPont primers. I put an epoxy sealer down before I put 3 coats of 2K urethane primer on there, which is a sanding type primer. So we're going to be block sanding the car now to get it perfectly straight. One thing that really speeds up the final prep process is if the primer has been properly sprayed. If you've done a really nice job of the final prep and finished your body in something like 320 grit, and then you prime over it and get your primer laid down really nice and your body works really straight. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how to do a spray bomb guide coat here. This is when you're block sanding, you do a guide coat so that you can see where you have and haven't sanded, and it will also highlight your high and low areas. And so just any leftover spray paint will pretty much work for this. But just make sure you give it a good shake and do a test spray on the wall or something to make sure you got a nice even pattern. Then you just hold it back a few feet and you just go over it real lightly like this to get a nice even splatter going on. So I'll just show you what that looks like. What you're aiming for is just like a nice even black splatter like that. And ideally you want to plan ahead and do this a couple days before you have to block sand, because you will find that the spray paint will want to gum up your sandpaper if you hit it right away. We're getting ready to block sand the hood here, and I just wanted to show you the different kinds of sanding blocks. And probably the most common one that I work with is this half sheet wide block. And so I'm going to be starting out block sanding with 320 grit on it. Another nice one to have is this long board. You always got to have a long board for doing the longer panels. And I like these plastic ones. This one's by Ultra Pro, but Hutchins and a bunch of brands make one exactly the same. And the nice thing about a plastic one is if you drop it, it doesn't get bent. The more common one that you'll run across and a bit cheaper is these wood-handled ones with aluminum on them. And they work just fine too, as long as they're perfectly straight. And commonly, even when you buy them, they're already bent if you put a straight edge down them just from shipping damage and whatnot. So I generally don't use that very much. I much prefer this one. It has a better feel to it as well. And then I also have this little, this is a 3rd sheet sander, and that's a nice one for smaller areas. And then they have these little rubber blocks that you'll run across just about everywhere. And I use that occasionally for roughing something out with a really coarse grit on it, but not very much for finishing work. Same sort of deal here. This is something that's useful for wet sanding and things like that, but and prepping blend panels and doing small areas, but for the general board sanding to actually straighten the panel. This is what I work with, this and this mostly, because they've got the surface area to make something straight. Basically, the biggest block you can use in a given area, the better. So I'll definitely be using my long board to rough out the middle of this hood where it's long, and down the center of the doors and things like that. And then I'll switch it up to the wide block as soon as I confirm that the panel's nice and straight. Also, you've got your things like this teardrop shaped block for doing contours and working around fenders and different things like that. Here's a little homemade block I just made out of a piece of flat bar, and this is for blocking in body lines and stuff. You put it inside your sandpaper, and that's how you get a body line really straight. And I'll go over some tips as I go, like things you can do to make an edge crisp, like run a piece of masking tape down it so that you're not sanding over the corner, and different things like that. So we're working with the long board here, and number one rule when you're board sanding is always never put any more pressure than you need to just hold the block there. So I kind of keep the block loose in my fingers all the time. So just like this, and you just let it follow the panel. Now I'm actually cutting this down with some 180 grit on the long board here, but when I switch to the wide block, I'm going to be working with 320. So when you get to edges, you can sort of see how I'm holding the block like this on a 45 and kind of rolling it on the edge. And you can see the car's not shaking around or anything because I'm not putting hardly any pressure on this. It's literally pretty much the weight of the board doing the work right now. If you want a straight job, you have to stick to that. You're not making things go any faster by pushing harder. All you're going to be doing is making your work not straight. It's not going to take the high spots down if you're pressing that hard. It's got to just sort of glide over the surface and find the high spots. Now I'm just going to go across because I don't want to work one side of the panel too much. You want to sand everything as evenly as possible. And to that end, I like to do like a crosshatch pattern that way for a while. Then I'll come up and I'll go across that way so that you're doing it very evenly, because if you're always going the same way, you could end up cutting a groove somewhere. But you're less likely to do that if you keep changing your angle. So just remember to just keep the block loose in your hand. I can't stress that enough. That is the key to board sanding, is keep the board loose in your hands at all times. Okay, so we're going ahead now with the wide block. We've already gone ahead and did the long block with the 180 on there, and it didn't really reveal any problem areas, so we're going to go ahead and wide block it all with 320 now. So same thing here. You want to, on these blocks, I kind of just let my fingers glide in here, you know. That tells me I'm not holding it real hard. I don't want to just lock down with a death grip on there, because then you're going to be pushing in somewhere and you're going to end up with not a straight job. It's going to be all lumpy when you're done. And the same thing, you want to go on like an angle and kind of change your angle so that it's like a crosshatch pattern. And then when you come up along an edge, you kind of want to work that edge like that on an angle. Same thing on the edges, you're kind of rolling the block over the edge. Okay, so like on an edge like this, and it's rounded, and you got a square block. So what you want to do is kind of have it on a 45, and then you just roll it around, and you can see that even though I'm blocking with the square block, it's blocking it nice and evenly here. You can see that I've taken that all off evenly there, even though I was using a square block. So it's how you hold the block, not the shape of the block, that does the work. One other thing, you're going to notice your paper's going to clog after a while. So a couple things you can do. You can take a little hand broom and sweep the paper. Some people do that. Or I rub it on my clothes. I'm always wearing grub clothes, so rub it on your jeans, rub it on your shirt, whatever, and that'll clean it off. One thing, when you're kind of going towards the end of a panel, and you'll always have some areas that are like harder to reach, like along the back edge here and stuff. Those are going to be your tricky areas that are going to determine whether your panel's going to turn out straight or not, how you deal with them. Because you don't want to be like going down here with the edge of the block trying to get those areas sanded. And you don't want to even be going back and forth, because you'll end up with a line here. So what you kind of have to do is keep, coming out here as you're doing it, and just, changing your block around and whatever. You want to kind of get those areas at the same time as you get in the rest. Even though they're harder to access, that's what makes or breaks your job, is sort of getting everything evenly sanded. When you're getting close to done, and also anytime you change grits, you want to blow the panel completely off. So I'm just about done with the 320 stage here, so I just finished blowing it off, and then I'm just checking for areas that got left behind. And I don't know if this is going to show on camera, but I can see it. You can sort of see right there. You can see there's a little low spot right there. You can see the texture in the primer, and also a little bit of the black from the guide coat. So when you find an area like that, you got to make sure that you get rid of it completely, or you're going to have a low spot there. That's what I mean by the black showing the highs and the lows in the panels. You got to be watching for this. Right along this edge here, you can see another black area here. So you got to make sure that line's gone, or you're going to have a groove. Also, another tip is these gloves here. These latex coated or vinyl coated, whatever gloves. I really like these for sanding, so your skin doesn't get all dried out. I've got that hood all done in 320 now, and that process took about an hour, and I was able to get it perfect. There's no low spots left behind or anything. If there was, you'd have the option of either repriming if they weren't too bad, or you'd have to putty them up if you had like a rock ding or something you missed, and then reshoot that with primer. But luckily in my case, this is ready to move on to the next step, which I'm going to be sanding inside the panel as well, and I'll be painting both sides of it. So I'm just doing the outside in 320 right now, and then I'll be sanding the inside in probably 400, painting it, and then the outside will be brought up to 600 and before I paint it. Just doing some more longboard action here, and I did want to explain earlier in the video, I had said I was using 180 grit, which is true, I am. And that's about as coarse as you want to go when you're board sanding, and really with the quality of finish I have here, it's not necessary, but I don't happen to have any 220 or 240 grit handy, which is what I would use if I had it available. But I have this, and I will be completely removing those 180 scratches with the other steps that I do. But I just wanted to mention it because you should only go up about 100 in grit increments, like 220 to 320, that kind of thing. 80 grit to 180. You only want to go up about 100 on that scale at a time. So I'm going up a little more than that, but I assure you those scratches will be gone. But like I say, a 220 grit would be more appropriate for what I'm doing here. The 180 will work good at finding the high spots and quickly filing them down. So you do want a bit more aggressive grit on the long board for that initial step, and it'll just knock down your texture and your primer quicker too. So without further ado, I'll just get started here. And you do want to wear a dust mask. So the same thing, a crosshatch pattern. And you can see I'm even going over the door a little bit. I've got these doors so precisely aligned that I can actually block between them quite a bit, and that'll help when people are looking down the side of the car in the sun. It will help to give it that real straight look that I'm after. Like I took a lot of time with the hammer and dolly to go down here and match the doors up perfectly so that I could do that, and that's a step that most body shops wouldn't even do on a restoration. But since this car was in really good shape when I started with it, I kind of had the luxury to spend a bit more time on steps like that. But of course you could just sand each panel individually too and still end up with a very nice job. I just wanted to go that extra mile on this car and make it beautiful for my mom. So, and then like I say, you want to change direction, so I'll come over here and I'll go at the opposite angle. But one thing you want to be careful of is, like, I have other body lines coming here, and you don't want to get your block in there and create grooves or create ditches running up there. So you want to be careful of that. There's still going to be a few areas here where I have a little unevenness, and so for them I will probably pop the door open and finish off, but it's nice if I can get most of that blocked right across, and then I'll have to do a little hand sanding in here. And I just wanted to show you guys really quick, like, these are just a couple swipes that I took on the camera. I didn't do any sanding off camera, and that's how evenly it's sanding, so you can see I've really got this car very straight. And I took extra care in these areas where there's often stamping marks to smooth this out. I did a lot of it right in the metal, and I used a little putty to get it perfect. Even at the edges of the panel, there's normally a raised area, and so all of that was hammered and dollied, plus putty to make it perfect. So you want to do nice, long, steady strokes with your long board, because that's what's going to find the high spots and the ripples. So that's what I like to do, is kind of center myself along the panel and then work my way down it. And I'll just show you what we're revealing here. Nothing dramatic, but you can kind of see there's a bit of a low area here, still a bit of a high spot at the end. And you can see there's a bit of a lower area here. Nothing drastic, nothing that won't sand right out, but I'm just showing you what we're knocking down. And if you were to use a shorter block, you just wouldn't have the same effect of knocking that down, and that's where you you look down the side of the car in the sun and you have all those little ripples. That's because somebody worked their way down there with a little block. You need that long block to knock those spots down. Okay, so you can see I'm longboarding away on this door here, and I'm leaving this area here, and it's really hidden this area here, and it's hidden this area here. Now, some people might be tempted to go down the edge and work this in, or go here and work this in, but you will see that you can't get away with feathering stuff when you're blocking primer. You have to treat the whole panel equally. If you feather something, you're digging a hole and you will see it. So to get this block down and get rid of this area, I have to continue blocking the entire surface of the door as much as I'm blocking this area, so that I'm bringing it all down evenly. So you better hope that this high spot is no thicker than your primer, which in this case I'm confident it isn't, but that's how critical it is if you want a straight car. Literally, your allowance for the whole panel is like, you know, just a tiny whisker. Just the thickness of the paint basically is all you've got for a margin of error. So take your time before you prime and make the car straight, and just use the primer to check your work, and get that final, you know, 3% is all it's meant to do, really. So I'm just working my way around the car with the longboard here, and so you can sort of see how I'm just loosely rolling it around the corner here. And go ahead and get your doors open. Go ahead and get your doors open so you can work up to the corners nicely. And just always remember, the key to block sanding is to sand everything as evenly as possible, so I'm not staying in one spot too long no matter what. Always try to work with the length of the panel too. Notice as I'm coming up to this flat area, I'm trying to push the block along it more, and this will certainly create a straighter effect. See the dust in the air? I'm just moving right along here. I've got the whole side of the car done in 180, and so I've switched back to the wide block to finish it up in 320, and I'm really loving this purple sandpaper by 3M. They claim it lasts 7 times longer, and so far I'm still on my first sheet. I did the hood with it and most of this door already, and it's still cutting great, so I'm loving that. This is quite a difficult area on the PT because you have all these intersecting body lines here, but you still want to get those body lines taken care of and shaped, and all your primer sanded down evenly with the rest of the door. So you get in there with this block on a bit of an angle, and you work it in those lines like that. And then you roll it around this rounded area. But then the last step that I like to do, so that you don't end up with a bunch of flat areas and grooves and ditches cut in that area, is take a piece of sandpaper just loosely on your hand of the same grit, wrap it around the panel, and that'll be your final step with each grit, is to go over it, just quickly over it by hand, following the curvature of the panel. Okay, YouTube, so I've got my homemade block for doing body lines here, and it's just a piece of flat bar with a washer welded to it, if you wondered. And so I just wrap a piece of sandpaper around it, and I use it to square up my body lines. So this nice long slow strokes is the key here. You don't want to be doing a bunch of short jerky strokes, and then you just kind of watch your progress and angle it around to get the side. Notice how I just keep moving it the full length of the panel. I don't want to be stopping anywhere in the middle because that'll create a ripple in that body line. And I'm really liking this 3M paper for not clogging up, and it just keeps on cutting. So you can see I've almost got that body line done already. So it makes pretty quick work of an otherwise difficult location to block sand. So I just wanted to show you guys, when you're working with like a body line like this, especially where it's curved and it's going to be hard to effectively you know, block sand either side of it without ruining the profile of the line. You know, you don't want any ripples along it, and you want a nice crisp edge, and this particular one fades away into the panel, so you don't want to affect where that fade line ends or have it curve out on the end or anything. This particular area of the car, I actually had to do a repair. There was some rust damage here created by a bad collision repair that had been done in the past, and so I actually cut this whole corner off and welded a piece in from another car. So I want to make sure that this area matches the other side really good, so I'm going to use some masking tape to run along here, and that'll give me something to work against so that I'm not messing up my line. And even though the line doesn't go to the end of the panel, I'm going to follow it all the way down to the end just so that I have that shape, so that I'm following the end right. And then I can take my sanding block and just work up to the line. I'm just using my smaller third sheet block to cut this in here. And you always want to be coming back out into the panel and making sure that you're hitting it quite evenly. And then when you get done that area, it's essentially the same thing to when you come to do this area. You don't want to be slopping onto there or taking the corner off. So you can come right here, and it's going to be difficult to see where I'm going here. It's a little dusty, so not the neatest line there, but you get the idea. You do that to protect your edge, and then you can come over here and sand here without fear of you know, removing your nice crisp corner. And then when you're finally done with both these areas, you're going to have a little bit right on the corner that hasn't really been addressed, and that's okay, because that's where you come in and you do some fine detail work by hand, and you catch that corner, and you really got to look at it and make sure that you've got that corner smooth, that you don't have a sharp edge on it from block sanding, and that all the texture's gone off the primer so that it will blend in, and just, you know, eyeball it and make sure it's not rippled along the edge, and if it is, you touch it up until it's perfect. So I'll just show you that line that I was working with there with the tape, and you can see what I mean by how it disappears into the panel down there, and you can see it's got a side profile to it, a bit of a lip. So you need to be very cautious in here that you don't have any ripples, because they're particularly going to show on that edge, and you're just going to have to attack a lot of it by hand and be mindful of where your sandpaper is going, that you're not digging little grooves and stuff, and just pay attention to what you're doing. Same thing around here. I mean, it's a compound curve. There's no other way to really attack it other than just with a little piece of sandpaper, carefully working around here by hand and making sure you've got that profile nice, and things like that are what really make the difference between a good paint job and a bad paint job. And it's also what really takes the time to have a good paint job. So some of you may notice that I haven't fully disassembled the car. Like, I have these back windows still in. I did take all the rubber and trim off around these windows, so it really doesn't matter that they're in. These ones, you are better to remove windows like this and things like this if you can, because it's gonna be a probability that it could peel back around the edge. I've taken a lot of extra care to really prep under there, and I'm confident that I've got it so it won't peel back. I just really wanted to avoid fully stripping the interior, which is what would be required to get those windows out. And sometimes you have to make judgment calls like that when you're doing projects like this. Otherwise, you know, you could end up disassembling the car down to every last nut and bolt because one thing kind of leads to another. So, well, I do like to disassemble most things. Like, I've taken door handles out and stuff, and that does lead to a lot better quality job. I had to make a few judgment calls there and leave a few things on. One other useful tool for doing any kind of paint prep work is Scotch Pads. They're great for getting in corners and edges. I don't like to rely on them for adhesion. I get everywhere I can absolutely with sandpaper. A lot of people would use these to, you know, scuff an area like this that's a little hard to reach with sandpaper, but it really doesn't take the texture off the primer. It just, you know, it roughs it up. It does create adhesion, but not as good as sandpaper, so it's great for hitting edges and stuff after you've already sanded everything you can reach with sandpaper, but as I said, I don't like to rely on it. They do make different grits of this stuff. This is equivalent to 320, this purpley red stuff. And then they have a gray colored stuff that is equivalent to 600, I believe. And then they also have a white one, which is ultra fine. I think that's like 1000 grit or 1200 grit or something more for polishing. So this is basically synthetic steel wool. Okay, well, things are coming along here, and I'm got most of this side done in 320 now. I've still got to go around some edges and stuff. I did get most of that edge work done on the front door. Areas like this, I'm taking a lot of time to really make sure I'm getting them even, so there's no grooves in here or anything like that. And so yeah, it's just going to be redundancy from here. So I'm going to wrap up this video here, but I will be doing plenty more videos on this car as I move along with the project, and showing you tips and tricks along the way to get a superior professional quality job. So please subscribe and stay tuned for more.